And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about slavery and gun violence in the South, Alana McLaughlin. Alana, let me welcome you to the show this morning and tell you how delighted we are to have you with the beginning of a new season here with us. And you've been with us almost 2 seasons now and given us quite a bit of information. And what we'd like to talk about today, Alana, before we get into slavery and gun violence in the South, let's have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of leading you to us this morning, and then we'll get into the topic this morning, slavery and gun violence in the South.
Well, I was born August 27th, 2002. I'm 10. I've been to multiple schools. I'm currently at John Early Museum Magnet Middle School, 5th grade. And I was basically raised in a very religious household, go to church every Sunday, and basically I'm here today to share with you certain things about slavery and gun violence in the South, and I've been studying on my iPhone, and you know, that's basically
and so you're ready to give us some information. Let's talk about that, Lana. As you indicated, the topic is slavery and gun violence in the South. You want to in the South, and we want to make sure that our audience understand that we are trying to deal with some of the real problems that we have in this country today, and that is with guns and violence. And we want to use slavery as an example of talking about some of the things dealing with gun violence in the South. And so let's start off by talking about the institution of slavery itself in the South.
Now, basically, when you think about slavery in the South, you think about African Americans working for Caucasians, African Americans being sold in auctions, etc. But it was much more than that. Slavery was basically slave revolts. It was much more than you basically think of when you hear the word slavery. Now, when most people think of, it's just like the regular stuff, you know, get beaten, etc., mistreated, but it was so much more than that. Now, if you've seen the movie Django Unchained, it was staged 2 years before the Civil War, and it's talking about a much deeper, much more gruesome part of slavery where if you try to run away, your life was over. And just much more gruesome, the things they used to do to African Americans back in those days. And basically, yeah.
And so I think the way you try to tie this in is that the presence of slaves simply created a fear among the population, and that fear prompted this idea of gun violence. Is that what you're suggesting? And that this fear that you want to illustrate through some of the slave revolts and whatever, I think that was your original idea and your original intention.
Now, slave owners really got agitated when the Stono Rebellion in 1739 happened. The Stono Rebellion was the deadliest revolt in colonial America, and it takes place in Stono, South Carolina. Armed slaves started marching to Florida towards freedom, but the insurrection is put down, and at least 20 whites and more than 40 blacks are killed.
Now, this is one of the insurrections and rebellions that we talk about, and of course, this kind of activity, you're saying, created a real fear among the population in terms of these rebellions, and therefore there seemed to have been a need for firearms and a need for protection. And so when you talk about slave violence and guns in the South, is that what you're suggesting?
And basically, say you were a slave owner. If you just experienced that turn of slave revolt, you saw all those slaves armed with firearms and guns, and you turn around to one of your slave workers, you at least have to think about, what if they did that to you? Now, the slave owners were scared for their lives, so they made it even more. So they they locked down the slaves. They made sure they had no weapons. They had less communication to other slaves.
Okay, and of course, let us take this first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.